You're listening to Faith in Action. I'm your host, Matthew Nowlin.
And I'm Shawn Graham.
We lead Conservative Christians of Tennessee, and we are thankful you're listening to this show. Conservative Christians of Tennessee exists to analyze political policy and politicians in Tennessee, and all from a conservative Christian worldview, whether they're wearing a cheap suit in Nashville or standing right up in your pulpit. All politicians to support Conservative Christians of Tennessee in our educational efforts, our public policy analysis, and any other needed endeavors. You can give a one-time or a recurring gift at patreon.com/TNChristian. Now, we want to glorify God by helping you to glorify God, so please don't hesitate to send us any questions or comments through email. You can reach me directly by emailing Matthew@tnchristian.com.
And I promise you it's not going to a cheap suit fund. You can email me at Shawn, SHAWN, @tnchristian.com.
And you can also help us out. You can follow me on X. I'm at MNBookman. And, I've said a lot of things that have offended the trannies. So I'm shadow banned on X. Your follows help us get our message out there. Again, that's at MNBookman. Our scripture for today is Proverbs, the 23rd chapter, verses 20 through 21, and then Philippians 3:19. But I'll go ahead and read those. Be not among wine bibbers, among riotous eaters of flesh, for the drunkard and the glutton shall come to poverty, and drowsiness shall clothe a man with rags. And then Philippians 3:19 reads, speaking of the glutton, whose end is destruction, whose God is their belly, and whose glory is in their shame, who mind earthly things. Listeners, we want to start this episode following Memorial Day by remembering those men who have fallen in the service of their country. This week, we celebrated Memorial Day in America. This is a day set aside since the Civil War to honor the men who died wearing the uniform of this country. Soldiers, sailors, Marines, airmen, men who gave the last full measure of devotion, men whose families were left with a folded flag. And on that day, we had what I really think is a farce and a tragedy involving the mayor of Minneapolis. And what did he do? At 9:03 a.m. on Memorial Day, Jacob Fry took to his official mayoral account and posted, quote, "Today we remember George Floyd, who was murdered by a former Minneapolis police officer 6 years ago," end quote. He then wrote 4 more posts about Floyd for a total of 5 posts. And in those, there was not one word about a single fallen American soldier. He only got around to Memorial Day hours later, and this was reportedly only after Breitbart News contacted his office for comment. Fry had to be shamed into talking about Memorial Day. This isn't a small thing. This is really just one more cog in the left's framework of historic revisionism. Memorial Day has a meaning. It was set apart by men who fought for this nation and buried their friends. They took that day and gave it to us. We use it to honor men who died in the service of their country. But to take that day and use it to honor a man who died in police custody of an overdose after passing a counterfeit 20 is not tribute. It is theft. It's theft from Gold Star families. It's theft from every widow who folds a flag every year and tries to keep going. And for us as Christians, it's a small window into a bigger problem. We have a culture that doesn't order its days. We have a culture that cannot honor the right things at the right time. Fry knelt before a gold-plated casket in 2020. 6 years later, he could not bring himself to honor our fallen soldiers on the one day of the year that we set aside for it. This is the order of his loves, his order of affections, and everything is upside down. Today on Faith in Action, we're going to talk about another sin that has the order of our loves upside down. This is a sin the Bible's clear on, and Protestant teaching has pulled out of the Bible directly, teaching on that heavily. The Reformers preached against this sin. Catechisms expound on it deeply and call it out by name. But lately, it's been a sin that our pulpits have really gone quiet about. And we're going to talk about gluttony. Our guest today, Pastor James C. Johnson, has been leading Northstone Baptist Church since 2016. He was born in Charleston, South Carolina, before moving to Minneapolis, Minnesota as a young man. Pastor James and his wife, Britton, have 3 sons, Mark, Andrew, and Matthew. Pastor Johnson regularly writes op-ed articles, which have been published in a variety of secular newspapers. Pastor Johnson is also the host of the Strength for Life radio segments, which can be heard on numerous radio stations. He's also the host of Strength for Life TV, which airs weekly on 3 television stations throughout the Gulf Coast. Pastor James Johnson, welcome to Faith in Action.
Matt, thank you so much. Shawn, thank you both for having me.
Glad to have you on here.
I trust you had a good Memorial Day. Were you able to enjoy your family and remember?
Yes, absolutely. Of course, on Sunday, I led the church in memorializing the just over 1.2 million men and women who have given their lives in service for our country since the Civil War. And then Memorial Day evening, we got to spend some time with members of our church. And so it was a good time just to fellowship and to express our appreciation.
So we want to talk to you about gluttony. And we are really big on definitions on this show. We believe that whoever controls the lexicon controls the conversation, and that whoever controls the conversation can lead to action. But what is gluttony? You've spoken on this, you've taught on this before. Just define that for our listeners, please.
Well, I think gluttony, we think of gluttony in the context of food, and I think it's just overindulging, or it is in excess. I think there can be a lack of temperance in several other areas of our life. I suppose we can be gluttonous in a multiplicity of ways, but gluttony is typically associated with food. And again, it's just overindulgent excess.
Okay. So most people, when they think about gluttony, they think about a 400-pound man at a buffet. They think about me 6 years ago, probably. But is that what the Bible means? An overindulgence, but is it about quantity, appetite, or heart posture, or maybe a little bit of all three?
Sure. Yeah. And would you share your story just quickly? I don't know how much your listeners have heard your story, but it's amazing. You've lost, I think, am I right to say 100 pounds? That's remarkable.
Right at about 105 right now. My story, when I was in Memphis, I missed the original year of COVID. I didn't get COVID the first year that it came out. But by the time it rolled around to the next year, I was up to about 335 pounds. I'm just under 6'4". So I was very heavy. And then I almost died of COVID. I got COVID and I almost died of it. My wife didn't want to take me to the hospital because she thought they would put me on a ventilator and that they would have killed me. So she cared. I had a fever greater than 101 degrees for over 90 days. I think it was 90, 91 or 92 days. My wife cared for me, and she kept me out of the hospital. When I got out of the bed and started going back to work, I just began having health problems. And prior to this, I had just prior to getting COVID and being on my back for 3 months, I'd had my annual physical, and I didn't have diabetes at that time. So my doctor sort of, thought there was something else going on, because I just started, food just started passing through me. I couldn't hold anything down, and I just wasn't getting nutrition. So he sent me in for some tests, and in the process of one of those tests, another doctor said, hey, you don't have anything you came in here to look for, but you might want to talk to your doctor about diabetes. I think you're a diabetic. So we went back, and sure enough, at some point in those time, I'd definitely been heading towards that, but I became diabetic. And sugar, I got the sugars and I did it to myself. And God was kind enough to give me a chance. And I began very intensely trying to treat that diabetes and then trying to lose weight. And Pastor, I will tell you, I remember at the lowest points of my life during that, which was some of the lowest points of my life, begging God to make me hate food. Just literally it was very emotional for me. And I think my wife would remember hearing those prayer sessions from the other room.
Yeah.
And just through God's grace, combination of exercise, my wife has been wonderful to put good food in front of me. And then also through a lot of failure. There have been a few times where I'd lose 50 pounds and gain 20 or 30 back, fall off the wagon. But yeah, I'm right at 105 pounds of weight loss, about 5.5, 6 years later. And praise God. And you have a similar story, I think.
Right. Yes. So I lost 75 pounds. So not quite as impressive as you, but yeah, I'm only about 5'10". So I really was out of control. So I totally relate to your story of it. I think on the surface, people think it's just a physical thing, but you referenced, is it a heart condition, like spiritually speaking? And so I think it's physical and it's spiritual. You mentioned just like through tears and kind of the mountains and valleys of your journey through it all. And so, yeah, it is a spiritual condition, and the Bible does speak much about it. I like how you opened with a verse from Proverbs 23, and then also Philippians 3:19. I think Philippians 3:19, the idea that their God is their belly, and our appetites end up ruling us. So yes, gluttony is typically associated with food overindulgence, but there is a spiritual problem at the core there. And let me just say, for me, in my defense, I don't really think I knew better. Okay. I mean, like church culture I grew up in, I started going to church when I was about 12 years old. And I am not complaining about the church culture I grew up in. I love the people that invested in me. But part of that culture was to kind of joke about being overweight and unhealthy and to minimize it. And so, like, I remember going to a youth conference one year in the Chicago area. Growing up in Minneapolis, they took us down to Chicago, and the youth conference led thousands of teenagers in silly songs like how the leader of the conference buffets his body every day. And they weren't talking about buffeting your body, like bringing it into subjection. They were actually glorifying the opposite. And some of the pastors I looked up to had big pot bellies and were just out of shape. And instead of applying 1 Corinthians 6:19, that your body is a temple and trying to steward your body well, they were actually exalting the opposite. And as a kid, I thought it was fun and silly and whatever. But as an adult who not only gets to steward my body, but then I now have for the last couple decades been shepherding people. I do a lot of hospital visits as a pastor. Where I'm at in Pensacola, the 3 primary hospitals, I'm in them 2 or 3 times a week. And a lot of what people are dealing with, and it's hard to communicate this in the moment, but a lot of it is avoidable if we have biblical temperance and lean into the fruit of the Spirit, love, joy, peace, long suffering. The final one in the list in Galatians 5 is temperance. Against such there is no law. And so I try to, in tactful, loving, shepherding kind of ways, help people avoid these things that are avoidable.
We're going to come back to our discussion on gluttony, listeners. First, I want to tell you about our sponsor, Navita IT Managed Services. They are more than a help desk. They're more than a network administrator. Navita has decades of business consulting and analytics experience. Navita IT Managed Services works to keep your business or your church growing as a healthy part of God's kingdom. They do this by helping churches and businesses steward their resources to become the best business leaders possible. So visit NavitaIT.com today to learn more about Navita IT Managed Solutions. And we are truly excited to have a Christian-owned business like Navita on board and aligned with us this year. And we know that you will love using Navita for all your IT solutions. So, Pastor, you're talking about these preventable visits into the hospital, and that has to be a difficult counseling position because you can't bring a long-term issue into a short-term scenario like that. We don't talk about gluttony anymore in the church. Would you agree, and this is going to depend on your circles, but would you agree that you could sit under most American pulpits for a year in America and really never even hear the word gluttony?
Yes. Oh, yeah, for sure. And that's unfortunate. And I think people have a misunderstanding as it pertains to shame. Mm-hmm. Shame can actually be a healthy thing. We try to remove shame from any pulpit, but I think one reason pastors don't teach and preach on it is because they don't want to make anybody feel ashamed.
Fat shaming saves lives.
Yeah, there you go, brother. That's absolutely true. Yeah. And when you've lost a lot of weight, I have too. Fit shaming is also a thing. Okay. Mm-hmm. And by the way, gluttonous people are not just fat people.
Yes,
they're skinny people that are guilty of the sin of gluttony. They just have a better metabolism than fat people. Okay. Mm-hmm. So gluttony can be applied across the board. But yes, it's unfortunate that pulpits are muted on this topic. And it's because you'll have sister so-and-so over here and brother so-and-so over here. And they're obviously out of shape or, they're overindulgent and you don't want anybody to feel shame. It is a topic that I deal with in my pulpit. And, mm-hmm. and I just usually try to not only give scriptural, but then also anecdotal explanation. Mm-hmm. And I'll put on the church screens pictures of me way out of control, yeah. and then I also put up not just anecdotal scriptural, but then even medical. The Center for Disease Control and Prevention says that obesity is now the number one health threat facing Americans. And it specifically says that obese and overweight people are at increased risk of developing conditions like heart disease, type 2 diabetes, stroke, hypertension, sleep apnea, and other respiratory related problems, several types of cancer, and even death. So it's like, if we believe 1 Corinthians 6:19, that's right, our bodies, a lot of this stuff is avoidable.
And Pastor, I think that this is exactly the kind of proper shaming that we're losing in many aspects in our culture. It used to be shameful to be seen walking out of a fraternity as a female. There was all this great cultural, just animosity against, that female shame kept females out of a male fraternity. It was just, it would not be allowed. Now, that's not a walk of shame. That is a glory moment that she's, indulged and taken part of sexual things that are going to bring harm and are going to bring decay and going to bring, all kinds of issues. This is very similar to the food that we glory in the debauchery, and our cultural rewards that and is geared toward that. It's our sexual appetite is the same way of this living toward our own inner God. It's disastrous in so many ways, and it plays out so visibly with physical health. It's all of these gluttonous kind of things, whether it's finance. You see people going into crime because this same attitude corrupts and is cancerous in so many ways. I love how you are very clear about where you were and honest about that. And we have people that are honest about where they used to live in sin before they got saved and things like that. But this is important too. This is the same thing. Hey, I'm not that anymore. Yes. I'm different.
Yes. Well, and too much of a good thing can become a bad thing. Okay. And like sex is given to us within the bonds of marriage, and it's honorable and undefiled. Outside of that, it will destroy you. It is the way that leads to hell. I mean, food's a good thing, but too much food or too little food leads to your demise. Same thing with like sunlight. Too much or too little, you have a vitamin D deficiency. Too much, you got skin cancer. Sleep. I mean, and the book of wisdom, again, you mentioned Proverbs 23, wisdom helps us balance all of these things. So much of life is a stewardship. And if we fail to steward God's good gifts the way he instructs us to, we will face the consequences.
We're in a situation now where we don't want to tell people to make bricks without giving them straw. And there are so many people who do not know the basic things that God has given us to get fit. If you're in the Memphis area, if you're in the Nashville area, or any of the listening areas, one thing I will tell you right now that you can do that I've had great blessing from is look up F3. You can go to f3nation.com. That is a workout group for men. And you can find a workout just about anywhere at 5:30 or 6 a.m. before your day starts. That is something you can go to and work out with men who will care about you and work with you as a brother. Guys, the Bible has given us tools. Pastor, did you do a lot of fasting to lose weight?
Yes, absolutely. And I know that has worked well for you as well. So intermittent fasting, I do it regularly, and I've done it for years. By the way, I lost most of my weight about 7 or 8 years ago, so I've kept it off.
Excellent.
And I tell people, whatever you do to lose the weight, you probably are going to have to do that the rest of your life. So personally, I did a fad diet, and you can't out-exercise a bad diet. I remind people of that, though I exercise regularly. Exercise is important.
That guy's always going to be chasing you.
Yeah, exactly. So, intermittent fasting is terrific. And, I probably 6 days a week, I do at least 18-hour intermittent fasting. Lots of times, very typical for me to do 22, 23-hour fasts. Yeah. And my whole cravings have changed. So it's a powerful thing. And I tell people too, cancer is a major problem. Okay, across our country, especially our country, not just around the world, but especially our country. And if we want to minimize the risk for cancer, I tell people we need to do 3 things primarily. We need to intermittent fast, because when you're fasting, your body goes into autophagy. So it is like a purifying experience for your body. But then also we need to sweat regularly. Yes. In the American culture, first world comforts, we love comfort. So we avoid sweat and strain. But sweating is like a detox physically for your body. And those things will help you greatly minimize your risk of cancer.
Yeah. And, I have a dear friend who has cancer, and one of the protocols he's using for his prostate cancer is intermittent fasting. His longevity doctor gave that to him as protocol. So, there are doctors that are explicitly saying what you're saying.
Now, you go much longer than just the typical 18 hours or 24 hours, right? What are some of your fast times?
So I do. And before I say that, I want to say for some of these more extreme fasts, you should definitely talk to a doctor. You need to, have some things in line where you monitor your blood sugar, and you're very, very not in a Buddhist way, but you're very connected to how you feel, like you're very aware of it. My most common fast that I'll do is a 72-hour fast. And my understanding is that maximizes autophagy, that where your body, eats its damaged cells and recycles. So I do this under a doctor's care, and he actually scans my body about once a month and tells me my muscle mass and my fat loss. And I will tell you that a 3-day fast once a month seems to be the ideal as far as maximizing fat loss and keeping muscle loss. All right, listeners, it's always our privilege to remind you about the mission of equipping the persecuted. This group has been on the ground for many years doing the Lord's work to save our fellow Christians and rescue orphans who are the persecuted Christians in Nigeria. They need food, clothing, shelter, medical care, and help building a safer way of life. If you give a monthly donation, you're going to create sustainable help for real Christians that have been attacked by brutal Muslim jihadists. Please visit equippingthepersecuted.org today, and you can sponsor an orphan for only $35 a month. You can also order African coffee and have it shipped straight to your home. Every bag of Equipping the Persecuted coffee that you purchase does more than fill your cup. It strengthens the body of Christ. 100% of those proceeds are going to go directly to supporting persecuted Christians in Nigeria. They have great flavors that you can try today. Again, that's equippingthepersecuted.org, and the persecuted Christians in Nigeria do thank you. We're back again with Pastor Johnson, and we are always tickled pink to have pastors who have wisdom on these topics that we're talking about with us. So, Pastor, you're a Baptist, I'm a Presbyterian. Gluttony is listed in discussions of the offices the New Testament gives, both elders and deacons. And I want to press you on this, Pastor, because I know somebody in the Orthodox Presbyterian Church who was placed under church discipline and forced out because he was a little bit too aggressive. He was too aggressive. He was right, but he was way too aggressive, pressing pastors on issues of gluttony, not pastors, but ruling elders. 1 Timothy 3, Titus 1, give the qualifications for elders and deacons. They have to be sober, temperate, not given to wine, lovers of hospitality. They have to be a man who governs his own appetites. Here's my question. If a man is visibly gluttonous, his body bears witness that he hasn't mastered his appetites, is he qualified for the office of elder or deacon? Should there be reservations about that? How do we handle that? I think it's very common in the church today.
That's a terrific question. I think it's indicative when you see somebody who is obviously out of control in the area of food. It's indicative of the tip of the iceberg. Okay. And so I think those are things that people should deal with behind closed doors and challenge a brother, and some, Proverbs 27:17, iron sharpening iron moments. But, often used is the term castaway in relationship to pastors who, you mentioned sexual sins, Shawn. Sometimes pastors fall into those things and they're a castaway. And that's 1 Corinthians 9:27, I think. And what's interesting is the key to winning at life is described in that phrase. In that range of verses. 1 Corinthians 9:24 through 27 talks about temperance. And that's where it talks about buffeting your body and bringing it into subjection. And then you get into 1 Corinthians 10, and twice in that early range of verses is the idea of examples. Okay. These Old Testament, in 1 Corinthians 10, there's Old Testament things being described there where people, you're to see these as examples and not fall into the same traps so that you avoid being a castaway. But it's all under the spiritual principle of biblical temperance. Okay. And you mentioned the pastoral epistles. I think it's 2 Timothy 3, where the Bible says that in the last days, and a catalog of evil that describe the last days, included there is incontinence, a lack of self-control. So as a pastor, I don't want to be a part of exhibiting a lack of self-control. I don't want to be the next name on the list of castaways. I want to look at all the examples around me, Old Testament ones that are listed in 1 Corinthians 10, but then the people I'm visiting in hospitals and other, scriptural and anecdotal evidences, and say, no, I need to learn. I mean, how many more times are people going to stub their toe on that same corner, and learn from these things that are around us? So,
Pastor Johnson, you do such a great job touching on, and not just touching on, flat out nailing these issues that we as a society have not dealt with. Where can our listeners go to get some of your teaching and any materials that you have available?
My son, Andrew, and I, by the way, thank you for having Andrew on. You had him on a few months ago, but we host a podcast together called Strength for Life Pensacola. And so if people want to find us on Instagram, Strength for Life just got on Instagram. And I always tell people too, don't just search Strength for Life, because then you just see strong people. You have to search Strength for Life Pensacola to find us.
Okay, sure.
But on Instagram, and we just got on Facebook as well. And then in all the places where podcasts are found, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and then YouTube. If people search Strength for Life Pensacola, they can keep up with what we're trying to do.
All right, listeners. So do that. Go search for Strength for Life Pensacola, wherever you listen to your podcast. And hopefully you're also following Faith in Action. Remember that on tnchristian.com, we have links to past shows. And if you want to support our work, be sure to visit patreon.com/tnchristian. But until next week, whether you're sad, if you've been struggling with your weight or struggling with just some type of sin, remember our favorite promise from the book of Exodus, the 15th chapter, the Lord shall reign forever and ever.